Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. I'm Dr. Alaa Jabbar Al-Maliki, and I am absolutely thrilled to have you, our brilliant undergraduate computer science students from the School of Computing right here at Université Utara, Malaysia, joining me today. You know, as future computer scientists, you're the ones who are going to build and, frankly, defend the digital infrastructure of tomorrow. But with all that incredible power comes some really deep ethical ambiguity. So today, we're diving straight into the global consequences of code. We're talking about cyber warfare law and ethics.
All right, so here's our agenda for today. We'll kick things off with a quick introduction, then jump into Section 5.3.1, Ethics in Cyber Warfare. After that, we'll break down the specific mechanics in Sections 5.3.1.1 through 5.3.1.4. That covers use of force, intent, attribution, and finally, military laws based on ethical systems. Okay, let's get into it. Introduction. Exploring the foundations and failures of modern ethics. Before we can even begin to unpack cyber warfare, we really need a baseline. So, what are ethics? Basically, it's a system of accepted beliefs controlling behavior, and it's usually based on morals. But here is the massive challenge we face in a globally connected cyberspace. These ethical systems, they come from completely different religions, cultures, and upbringings. So trying to define a universal standard for what's right and wrong across the entire globe is, well, it's inherently difficult. Let's ground this theory in a real-world disaster, just to put it in perspective. Take a look at the 2001 Enron scandal. You had executives deliberately hiding literally billions of dollars in debt from their shareholders, which obviously resulted in bankruptcy and ruined a lot of lives. And from that massive failure of personal morals came a very strict structural reaction, the 2002 Sarbanes-Oxley Act. That act legally mandated that corporations actually publish a code of ethics. Now, this kind of ethical ambiguity translates directly over to computing. Let's rewind to late 2010, right after the arrest of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Hacktivists launched these massive denial of service, or DOS attacks, against companies like Amazon, MasterCard, and PayPal. Why? Simply because they were perceived as unsupportive of Assange. As future IT professionals, I want you to really ponder this. Were those legitimate targets? What are the actual ethics of weaponizing digital traffic just for ideological reasons? It's a gray area, right? Moving on to Section 5.3.1, Ethics in Cyber Warfare, the divergence from traditional battlefields. When we step out of the corporate world and onto the actual battlefield, the differences are pretty wild. In conventional warfare, things are relatively clear-cut, you know? Battles are geographically bounded, you can physically see the troops or tanks. But cyber warfare, that's entirely defined by legal and moral ambiguity. Our networks are completely borderless. Secondary consequences are insanely hard to predict. And unintended collateral damage to civilian networks is just this constant, looming threat. The fog of war we always hear about is so much thicker in cyberspace. Which brings us to Section 5.3.1.1, Use of Force. Translating physical destruction to digital commands? This right here is where your understanding of system architecture gets terrifyingly real. How do we even define force when nobody is firing a physical weapon? Well, a cyber attack actually qualifies as a use of force if the damage is equivalent to a kinetic physical attack. I mean, imagine sabotaging a SCADA or an industrial control system to just shut down an entire nation's electrical grid. Or even more chillingly, a malicious packet of code intentionally crashing an airliner. Legally speaking, crashing that plane via a network hack carries the exact same weight as shooting it out of the sky with a missile. It's intense stuff. To put some actual boundaries around this, we turn to something called the Talent Manual. It states that a cyber operation constitutes use of force when its scale and effects are comparable to non-cyber operations. And here is the real kicker. A nation doesn't even have to launch the attack themselves. If a state simply provides sophisticated malware and training to an independent group to attack another country, that alone officially constitutes a use of force. Next up is Section 5.3.1.2, Intent, the line between malice and a system error. Okay, picture this. You're managing a massive network, and suddenly things start breaking. It is incredibly easy to immediately perceive an anomaly as a malicious attack. You're seeing service crashes, altered files, maybe some highly unusual port traffic. Panic sets in, for sure.
But wait, those exact same symptoms can have entirely legitimate, completely non-malicious causes. Actually, scratch that. It might just be a faulty OS patch, or a user accidentally deleting some crucial files, or a bad application configuration. Jumping to conclusions without determining the actual intent can lead to some rash, catastrophic retaliation. So proper technical analysis, it's not just good IT practice, it literally prevents wars.
Let's look at Section 5.3.13, Attribution, the danger of digital masks. So that technical analysis we were just talking about, it gets exponentially harder in a borderless landscape because of attribution. Attackers almost never use their own IP addresses. Instead, they obscure their attack sources, intentionally hiding behind other countries or organizations, like a digital mask. If a nation is attacked and they trace the signal back to a server in some unwitting third-party country, they might retaliate against that completely innocent shield. Playing these attribution games, which is super common in intelligence, risks dragging totally innocent networks into an outright war. And finally, Section 5.3.1.4, Military Laws Based on Ethical System, Applying Ancient Rules to Modern Networks.
So how on earth do we legally manage all this chaos? Well, nation-states generally follow established rules to prevent morally reprehensible actions. The law of armed conflict is built on treaties like the Geneva Conventions, which were developed between 1864 and 1949, with a heavy focus on humanitarian treatment. And before that, the Hague Conventions established rules on the actual conduct of war. Today, legal scholars are basically wrestling with a monumental task, taking these laws written for muskets and cannons, mind you, and trying to translate them into code to mitigate atrocities in cyberspace.
At the absolute bedrock of all these laws is an ancient Roman concept called bellum aestum, or just war theory. Basically, it provides the fundamental moral foundations for why a war can be fought in the first place and exactly how it must be conducted. It's fascinating because even in our highly advanced digital age, state-sponsored cyber warfare still relies heavily on this ancient concept to determine if a hack is legally justifiable or if it crosses the line into a war crime.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question for you, the future leaders of the computer science field here at UIU. Existing laws like the Hague and Geneva Conventions were designed strictly to govern state-to-state conflicts, right? But today, independent hacktivist groups, rogue non-state actors, and decentralized networks possess the power to launch attacks that are totally equivalent to state-level warfare. So when independent hackers can rival the destructive power of entire nations, how must our international laws evolve to protect the global network? I want you to think deeply about that, because in your careers, you are going to be the ones helping to answer it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.